righty, well, we have here now Colorado's second smallest falcon. This is the Merlin. If we were in Scotland or France or other countries in Europe, this would be the smallest falcon they have because their kestrels are so much larger than ours. This is a male, and this is a male boreal or taiga race Merlin. And yes, he is missing part of his left wing. You can see the deep, deep gunmetal gray, almost peregrine-like color that he has. Most of the Merlins that we have here in Colorado that we see are the prairie race, which used to be known as the Richardson's Merlins. The adult females are a pale brown. They look almost identical to prairie falcons, that color from behind. And the male Merlin in that race is a pale gray, almost a sky or Wedgwood blue. They really, really are beautiful. Merlins have banded tails, bands the whole way up. He is still molting. Black and white on the males and various shades of brown and cream on the female. A male Merlin and a female kestrel will be very similar in weight, but the proportions are completely different. Kestrels have the second longest tail in proportion to their body size of any North American falcon. Only the Aplomado has a longer tail. Merlins are more compact, and they physically speaking are more just like a smaller version of the prairie falcon or the peregrine. Their tails are sort of a more medium length, long pointed wings, but they also have long toes. It's really interesting. If you compare an American kestrel to a Eurasian kestrel, the toe proportions are exactly the same. The European one just has bigger feet. These guys have a long middle toe, really clearly indicating that the vast majority of their diet is small birds. So we get these guys fall and winter. Merlins are always here by the first week in September, but they are almost impossible to find unless you happen to catch one migrating or hunting. Unlike kestrels, who are very bold and extroverted and sitting on telephone wires and poles and the very tops of trees, Merlins do not want to be seen. They race across the landscape as they migrate. By midwinter, sometimes you can see them sitting on fence posts, especially in the Pawnee National Grasslands, the Comanches, but really they tend to sit in trees right up against the trunk, hiding until they can make one of their high-speed dashing attacks. They are not going to do the stoop or the dive that a bigger falcon like a prairie or a peregrine would do. Instead, they just tail chase and fly something down until they can snatch it out of the air. And the other thing Merlins do, which is just so spectacular if you happen to see it, is they will actually work a flock of starlings or red-winged blackbirds, particularly if they are in a high food density situation, so like feedlots and dairies. And I tell people, if you want to see Merlins in Colorado, go out east and get permission to just drive around or sit at the entrance of a dairy or feedlot, because they're feeding, grain to the cattle, and there are thousands of blackbirds and starlings, which frankly are agricultural pests at certain times of the year. The Merlins know that's where the food is. Merlins are extremely territorial, and periodically one will just come in. The starlings all rise in unison to escape the predator. Prairie falcons do the same thing. Peregrines do this, especially in California. The large swirling flock that they call a murmuration is meant to confuse the Merlin. And what Merlins will do is they will circle it like a marlin or a big tuna, circling and herding a school of fish in the water, or an Aussie shepherd herding sheep. And then at the right moment, the Merlin will just plunge into the flock, grab a starling, which is nearly as big as it is, and come to the ground. That is a classic Western Colorado dairy agricultural hunting technique for Merlins. If they're not hunting near human development, they will take meadowlarks, they will take sparrows. And Merlins are another bird whose populations have really changed over the last 30 years. When they are first out of the nest and migrating down from Canada, the Merlins we get here in Colorado mostly come from Canada. They hunt a lot of insects and ground prey their first year. An immature Merlin is going to be brown with brown and gray stripes, cream stripes on the tail. So in other words, unless you physically have the bird in your hands, it can be very difficult to tell a first-year female from an adult female. But one of the ways you can tell is to look and see how worn the tips of the tail are, because those first-year birds catch a lot of insects and mice on the ground. Whereas the adult females, if they survive, they have perfected the art of catching stuff in the air, and they never deign to come down and touch the earth. Anyway, because those first-year Merlins eat a lot of insects, before DDT was banned and when it was still so prevalent in the environment, Merlins definitely suffered due to DDT. They do not build their own nests. They will take over the nest of another songbird, crow, raven, that type of thing. So Merlin populations were plummeting in the 60s and 70s as well. DDT was banned, the waters became cleaner, and then as cities and suburbs spread into agricultural areas, Merlins figured out that cities have a lot of sparrows and a lot of starlings, and they have wonderful, dense planted spruce and pine and ponderosa trees. So there are communities, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where there are studied and plentiful populations of urban nesting Merlins. Seattle, Bellingham, Washington, and Bellingham actually has the black or Pacific Merlin, which is the smallest and darkest of the three that we have here in North America. So this really, really interesting falcon is actually increasing in number and learning how to survive in a suburban environment. This little guy weighs 5 ounces, 4.7 to 5 ounces. He is also 5 years old. He came from Oregon. He was actually discovered on Valentine's Day by some people snowshoeing who found him floating in a stream, just as you see him here. My theory is that he was hit by a car racing across the road, and it just literally knocked the wing off at the hand joint. So he has the thumb, but he has nothing else. And he was rehabilitated in a center in Oregon and fattened up. The fact that he didn't drown and didn't freeze and was still alive is a miracle. And we got him 6 months after that accident.